Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 209 of the Immigration Lawyers Podcast. Today, we have a great guest, Bruce Buchanan, a veteran in the game who really focuses a lot on I-9 verification and, ICE inspections that come and a lot more kind of employment kind of stuff. So I wanted to have him come on and talk about his focuses and share some of his information, knowledge with fellow practitioners. Before starting, I want to remind everybody that the Immigration Lawyers Toolbox issue number 2 is out. Go to immigrationlawyerstoolbox.com/magazine to check out both issue 2 and number 1. Number 3 should be coming out in the next few weeks. There's a lot of final touches we're putting on. The special edition just focusing on O-1A visas. And then hopefully next quarter we'll have number 4. Bruce might have an article on that one if we could. That'd be great. I want to thank the sponsors for the magazine and the podcast, in particular DocuWise. DocuWise is the all-in-one form, CRM, and office management system for immigration attorneys and law firms. It does a great job. They're really expanding in the employment space. They just have all sorts of new stuff every day almost that is popping up. Definitely a good system to have. If you want to get it at 10% off their annual plan, just go to docwise.com/immigration-lawyers-podcast and use the code immigration lawyers podcast to be able to get that. And finally, if you're new to immigration law and you're trying to learn the game, especially marriage-based immigration, family-based immigration, which is the focus of my firm, email me at info@immigrationlawyerstoolbox.com. I have a full-on course, 12 hours plus, maybe with the office hours, 20, 25 hours of just training there. And we're going to be doing an EB-5 program about direct investment coming up. If you're interested in that, email me and let me know. We'll get you on the live recording before it comes into a whole system. But with that, Bruce, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Absolutely. I appreciate the invite.
So, Bruce, could you tell us about where you are, where you grew up, and then how you got into immigration law?
Absolutely. I grew up in Miami, Florida. Um, born and raised, went to undergrad at Florida State, and then came up here to Nashville, Tennessee, to go to Vanderbilt Law School. But I haven't stayed here all my life. After I graduated here a long time ago, 1982, I went to Little Rock, Arkansas, where I practiced labor law. I was a prosecutor for the National Labor Relations Board and had the opportunity to come back to Nashville in 2003, join a private firm. And probably about several years later, I had the opportunity, the invitation to branch out from labor employment law into immigration.
Mm-hmm. And how was the opportunity, the transition? A lot of people, there's a lot of lawyers kind of fall into immigration. Is that kind of what happened in your case?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'll try to tell a story, really funny story, kind of quickly. But our immigration lawyer left probably about 2005 or so,
Mm-hmm.
and the senior partner came to me and said, "Hey, we want you to take over the immigration practice." And first words out of my mouth was, "Well, the only thing I know about immigration is it involves foreigners." And he said, "Oh, don't worry about it. It's all forms, so you don't have to worry about a thing." And I'm like, "Yeah, all right, uh-huh." And I was already transitioning from being a labor lawyer to being an employment lawyer, wage and hour, and FMLA and everything. It seemed like that was a lot to put on my plate, so
Mhm.
I turned it down that time. They hired somebody else. That person didn't work out, so they came back to me, and about a year or so later. And at that point, I said, "Okay, but I gotta believe it's a little more than just forms. I literally am just gonna have to take time to start reading books,
Yeah.
at work, and counting that as work hours." And so I had about a month where basically I just, I read the immigration practice, and something else
What
also.
years was this?
This was 2007.
Okay.
So,
So
um,
yeah, a lot of the big changes that happened in 2007. I mean, there's been big changes since then, but like this is post 9/11 kind of time. Okay.
right, yeah. So, it was, and as I knew that my senior partner was, BSing me, that it was just going to be a bunch of forms. I started it. I continued to do some labor employment because I stayed with the firm, and I became I was the head of my immigration section because I was the only person doing it. So it's pretty easy to be the head of the section. But I hadn't been doing it very long when one of the other partners came to me and said, hey, one of our clients just got a notice from the Immigration Customs Enforcement, ICE. They want to see their I-9s. Um, we need you to get out there to figure out what the hell's going on. And I said, great. So, I had, read up on some I-9 compliance stuff because I knew we represented a lot of employers because we were a medium-sized firm.
Mhm.
And so I wished I was, fully ready for it, but I know I wasn't, but I faked it pretty good. And went out there. Luckily, it was right here in Nashville, Tennessee. And They made one of my favorite candies. So a side benefit was I did get a lot of candy while I was there.
Huh.
Um, and They had several hundred employees. And First thing I did was pick up the phone to whoever, the agent that delivered the back then it was just a notice of inspection. They didn't have a subpoena attached to it back then, and said, "Hey, you haven't given us very much time to respond. Can we get a little more time?" And I don't know, maybe we got 3 days, 5 days extra. Usually, only I mean, you can get just 3 business days. Now, often ICE will be nicer on the front end and give you more, but they don't have to.
Yeah.
And you do request an extension, they don't have to. I mean, you have to use your persuasive powers to convince them that you ought to get an extension. And most of the time, it works. Um, there are some offices that they just laugh at you. Atlanta, it's like, yeah, well, get your stuff here in 3 days, or don't get anything at all. I think Chicago gave me 1 extra day, and one time Nashville told me no. Well, they never told me no. They said we'll consider your request, but if you don't hear from us, we're not going to grant it. And unfortunately, my client had somebody die on the job site the day before, and he was undocumented, and so OSHA was already on the site, and they weren't too hip on giving us a break. So,
Yeah.
but that case, that notice of inspection back in 2007, it went great. The results were no fines, got a warning notice, which, quite frankly, is a celebration
Yeah.
when you don't get fined. But it was a little trial by fire. Immediately realized that the my client had a lot of not a lot, some undocumented folks working there. Um, Most of the time, clients don't know that because, as I like to say, there's a lot of good fake documents out there. Some are better than others. Chicago seems to have the best fake document
Yeah.
that I've dealt with. Nashville's not very good. But and then at that point you have a decision to make for the client. If you figure out that there are fake, then they are undocumented. Now you didn't know it until that point, so you can fire them then, or you can wait for ICE to tell you that, hey, these get a notice of suspect documents, meaning, hey, their documents don't match our records. Either they produce something new, or you're going to have to terminate them. So sometimes it's better to terminate them on the front end because you can control it a little better. Sometimes, though, the employer doesn't want to do it on the front end because it's a matter of numbers.
Mhm.
They're not ready. I mean, they don't have any folks waiting to get hired.
Yeah.
It's going to hurt their production. So this company, as I recall, they wanted to terminate. They wanted to do everything they could to get in line. And so, a few uncomfortable situations of, terminating some folks. I was a little worried about whether my tires would be slashed when I got out to the car on that I was out there on a Saturday. So, it worked. I enjoyed it. I mean, and I've told many an attorney and client that I really do enjoy I-9 compliance work, and I enjoy the ICE audits. Most immigration attorneys have told me I'm crazy because most people, you get into immigration, you want to help people, you want to help get somebody a green card, get somebody citizenship. help an employer, bring in some workers. Here it's a little different, but your goal is to try to minimize the penalties that your client will face, and for that, I I I I sense a lot of pride if I can get them for no penalties at all. A warning notice. A couple times my clients have gotten what I call the perfect score, where you get a letter saying everything was basically perfect, and they don't even get a warning notice. Those are always fantastic. They don't happen very often, but and then so from there, I just, I got the opportunity to do more and more I-9 audits, ICE audits, and that firm had was nationwide really, and so had clients all around. So whether it was here in Nashville or in Georgia or wherever. So I got access to a lot of I-9 audits, and felt good about it. Did a good job. Started building up an expertise.
Yeah.
As time went on, felt more and more comfortable, and luckily that is continued to this day.
Well, let's talk about a little bit now. You got to premise this by this is not individual legal guidance. People would really, each case is different. But
Absolutely.
for those newer attorneys who are getting this, like when you get the call from someone brand new, fresh, and says, "Listen, ICE contacted us. What do we do when we get that phone call? What's the first reaction you should have?"
Well, of course, when they contacted you, they've either delivered the notice of inspection, and these days it's with a subpoena, or some of the offices do it by FedEx.
Hmm.
So of course you want to get a copy of that, within 30 minutes after you talk to this new client. So you can see, who to contact to get an extension. See, well, or see if they did give you only 3 days. Sometimes when they do it by FedEx, they do give you like 14 days, and you don't need an extension. But that's really your first mode. To first action is you got to make sure when are these documents going to be due. And second is you really need to get to the employer, whether the employer is in your town or in another town. Now, it's really it's a lot easier to do if if you actually can go to the facility.
Hmm.
Uh, and that sometimes means, picking up at a moment's notice to get to that facility. Now, during COVID, it's been a little tougher. And So, we've been doing them, meeting with the clients and looking at I-9s through Zoom, through,
Yeah.
scanning and emailing the I-9s to me. I mean, and, some of them were, I mean, the second to the last one I had um, was in Hawaii, and, wasn't exactly practical, even if it wasn't COVID times, to
Yeah.
get out there. And my company was a construction company, and their project was winding down, so there really wasn't anybody to go out there to talk to. So what you want to do is you got to train whoever your HR are, or whoever is involved, so that you can help them look for errors. I mean, I do most of it. Kind of depends on how big the client is. I mean,
Hmm.
some of my clients have only been 10 employees, 20 employees, 30, but then I've got some that are hundreds of employees. I had one out in San Francisco back last year during COVID, and it was hundreds and hundreds of employees. Luckily, we had a decent amount of time. And so I went through a lot of I-9s looking for errors. Um, what you're hoping to do is remediate, correct the errors, especially what they call substantive errors. Um, Now you have to be a little careful as to how to do it. Of course, you as the attorney can't do it because you're not the one who wrote on the I-9. So you have the employee or the HR representative of the company. Um, if you're out of Chicago, they like to do it they're sort of funky about it. They tell you can't touch the original I-9. So last time I said, okay, I can't touch it. That doesn't mean I can't attach a new I-9. and make all the corrections, and then attach the old I-9 to it. Now, so far, unfortunately, that hasn't had a lot of success with the Chicago office. They seem to be a little more difficult than others, but I'm hopeful that they'll come around.
Is it in other offices where you write on the side with the date that you made the correction? Is that the proper procedure?
Proper procedure is to make the correction. So, say you left out the expiration date of a document, you would
Hmm.
add that in, initial it, date it, and that's the correction. If the employee left off something, say they never checked off the right box for their status, they didn't check they were a permanent resident, write their A number in there, then they would do that, initial it, and date it. So,
Yeah, I
um,
was under the impression that's the correct method, but Chicago doesn't accept that.
well, there are offices that say once the subpoena has been delivered to you or the notice of inspection,
No one changes
they're not
that.
going to accept
Okay.
any corrections. And the Chicago case, I have to say, is a little, there's some unusual aspects of it. I'll
I
just put
see.
it that way.
Well,
Atlanta has been difficult to get those for them to accept that. It seems to sometimes they don't. So, but every other office, and I've dealt with, Charlotte, Jacksonville, Orlando, Miami, New Orleans, Little Rock, Memphis, all over. Now, even with that, sometimes there's things you can't correct. I mean, if
yeah,
it was untimely done, that's going to be a substantive error for the employer not getting it done in time. Then you're gonna, that's going to be a problem, and you're going to have to, you're probably going to face substantive penalties. Um, Unless they're not that many, and then they go, hey, you know what, you did a good job,
yeah.
I'm going to give you a warning notice. I mean, and sometimes you get the biggest break around. I mean, I had a Chinese restaurant that, I mean, they didn't have the I-9s at all when they were the notice of inspection out in Arkansas. And I told him right up front, I said, we're going to do everything we can, we're going to get all I-9s done for the first time, we're going to submit them, but they're all late. So they're, you're gonna, but luckily you only got like eight employees. So, $2,000 a pop, you're going to look at about a $15,000 fine.
Yeah.
I dealt with the auditor a lot in Little Rock, and for whatever reason, he basically said, well, Mr. Buchanan, I appreciate that they hired you. You got them straight. You've trained them. These I-9s are perfect now. We're just going to overlook the fact that they were
Wow.
done after the fact, and they got a warning notice. And
Wow.
the clients that get warning notices. I once had a client in Miami that they wanted to. It was 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and they wanted to run down to the ICE office and pick it up that afternoon. And the guy goes, "Well, I'm gonna be leaving at 4:15. I think I can make it." And the guy goes, "No, no, just come in the morning. It'll be okay." So, now unfortunately for some companies, they make a big mistake. They don't hire either an attorney or they don't hire an immigration compliance attorney.
Yeah.
Because really, quite frankly, hiring an immigration attorney who doesn't know anything about compliance, yeah,
Yeah.
it's better than hiring Joe Schmo off the street attorney, but still it's not, it can be problems. And I had a client down in well, they weren't my client until they hired me, but down in Florida. And I was contacted about 2 summers ago, maybe 3 summers ago, and they had gotten proposed what's called a notice of intent to fine for $767,000. Now,
Yeah.
they told me up front they could afford to pay it. They were a medium-sized construction company, but they said we don't want to.
Of
Like,
course.
okay, well, you're being honest. That's good.
Yeah.
And so it took me probably 2 years of negotiations with ICE, and we definitely had some problems. I mean, my client had destroyed like 200 I-9s mistakenly. They were
Yeah.
terminated employees, and they didn't realize they needed to keep them, which there are some rules about keeping terminated employees I-9s. But I was very proud that we were able to resolve it for $495,000,
Hmm.
uh, which is still a huge chunk of change. And they didn't need a payment plan. I mean, they'd like, where do we write the check? And they even called me, go, we want to write the check before the end of the year because we have for our bookkeeping purposes. I'm like, oh, I'm sure the government will speed up the process to get your 495,000. So that was, yeah, it was down a little over 1/3. But
You end up
that's,
getting a percentage or something of how much you save as a
yeah,
contract.
one of my staff members says, you ought to start working on these things on a percent when you save that much money. So
Yeah,
I've had some where I've saved over maybe 2/3,
yeah.
50%. I mean, sometimes what you find is ICE isn't perfect. They make mistakes in their own audit.
Hmm.
And I had an audit out of Atlanta, and they tried about, I think it's 40,000. And they said, you kept all these people who were undocumented, and you knew it. And I'm like, how the hell do they know it? And they go, oh, we gave them a notice of suspect documents, and they ignored it. Again, they didn't hire me at the time. And we were able to prove that you never served any notice of suspect documents. And I'm like, they go, well, we think we have it around here somewhere. I'm like, well, if you do, provide
Yeah,
it. The next day they just said, you know what, we can't find it. We'll just take all those allegations out. So we went
yeah,
from 40,000 to 14,000,
yeah,
overnight. Sometimes they lose the I-9s. Like, nope, we provided you the I-9s, and they make a mistake in that they give you a receipt, but they don't tell you how many I-9s they got most of the time.
yeah,
You can use it to your advantage, because you can say, well, I can tell you we gave them to you. You don't have any idea how many we gave.
yeah.
Uh, and again, another case out of Atlanta, I knocked about $50,000 off. It was $100,000 case. So it was good.
So you made a couple points that I was going to ask questions about. You kind of touched upon them, but how important is getting on site? Because I've got good I-9 calls for juicy companies, but they're in Hawaii, and I'm debating. And I didn't do it. I said maybe just get someone local. You don't have much time. Someone needs to go there and see what's going on. How much of a is it strongly preferred, or is it almost like mandatory? It's better to go on site.
I mean, I would have said until 2 years ago it was mandatory.
Hmm.
But we've learned to cope during COVID.
Yeah,
I still think it's being on site is better, even just for the training aspect, because
yeah.
that's a lot. I mean, they've already made their mistakes. We're
Hmm.
going to try to correct them, but they've made them. What they need to know is, how do you not make those mistakes in the future? And so I've done the training through Zoom, and it's lasted an hour and a half. Very few questions when I
Hmm.
do training through Zoom. 2 weeks ago, I was pretty excited. It was my first business trip since COVID. Went down to Northeast Mississippi, and strictly for training. They've had an ICE I-9 audit. They didn't hire me. They're still waiting for the results. But they think they've got some issues. They had a lot of questions, and they had three related companies. But I spent 7 hours talking I-9 compliance, three different locations, and tons of questions. And as I was leaving, it occurred to me, it's because you were live and you weren't on Zoom. So when I got back here, I've been trying to plan some training for some Mexican restaurants in North Carolina. One has been audited. The rest, maybe, because they're all interrelated. And I pushed really hard. We got to do this in person,
Yeah.
because I'd done the first Mexican restaurant. I'd done the training Zoom, and again, no questions. Okay, yeah, got it. And even though 2 days later they come back, and I said, well, I covered that in the training. Oh, well, we didn't understand at the time. I was like, well, but you didn't say that. So, and just looking at the I-9s in person, one, you can't tell unless whether they're a copy or an original. Now these days, with ICE allowing you to send it in by email, they don't know if it's a copy or an original. So I guess you got an advantage there. But it used to be that, and I think it will go back to, you
Yeah.
had to give them the original I-9s, and if it's a copy, they don't consider that to be a valid I-9. But you're not going to know that if you're
Hmm.
getting those, if they're scanning your scan, you're not going to be able to get the client to look at everyone going, yeah, I think that's a copy. They just look at it and say, I got one. So, yeah, heading out to Hawaii, that's tough.
Yeah.
I mean, tough in one way, not nice in another. But given the ramifications of how quickly you have to do it, I mean, one of my cases down in Georgia, it was a restaurant that was a chain, it was a franchise, and I talked to their regular corporate attorney the night before, back and forth, and by the end of the evening, yeah, he doesn't want to hire you. He thinks he can do it himself. Okay, that's fine. So I come to work the next day. I didn't pack a bag, didn't try to I get a call like at 10:30 in the morning. Hey, you know what? He's changed his mind. It's like, well, okay, so we're only about 4 hours from Atlanta, so it was quite frankly just easier to get in the car and drive. But
Yeah.
that meant driving home, packing a bag, driving down there. And it was a good thing I did because they were a mess. And I was there the next day from 9 a.m. until 1 a.m. the following morning, going through I-9s, so that we could get them to ICE later that morning. Because again, Atlanta is one of them that doesn't give you an extension. So that's the type of thing that you have to immediately make plans. Whether
Mhm.
I've been to one in Savannah, I just hopped on a plane. I've hopped on planes, many times right away to Chicago. I've got the Chicago case. So other times I'm within driving distance. I've got a lot of clients in Tennessee and in Georgia, and most of those are drivable cases. But post COVID, I'm going to be pushing again for in person. Now,
Yeah.
if you got a client that's only got 15 employees, they may just not be willing to pay your travel expenses.
Yeah.
Because they can look at their potential liability and go, okay, I don't know that I want to pick up, for your plane fare I don't know how much it is from LA to Hawaii, but they may throw a
Yeah.
little upset about that and their hotel bill at the nice beachside hotel.
Now we have a lot of people who are solos listen to this. If someone calls them, it could be an overwhelming amount of work. Like, is there a number of employees where it's like too much one person handle, or they need staff, or coming at the firm structure, be able to handle this? How big a company could someone handle, or when should they say we need help? Or there's a
Well,
lot of nuances. Maybe they have an HR that can help you. How should
right.
they look at it to not get overwhelmed?
Sure. So, I mean, I'm solo. I have three staff, but for compliance stuff, I pretty much do it all myself. Um, what's the largest I've done? I had a hospital out in Fort Smith, Arkansas, over 1,000 employees.
Hmm.
So I got a few extra days, and we had some good HR folks out there that worked too, and we got it done.
Yeah.
And, no penalties, anything. I didn't have eyesight after I left Fort Smith, but I it was done. Um, Now, I mean, if it's a solo that doesn't have any experience with I-9 compliance, um, I strongly suggest you don't try on the fly. Um, I have done worked with an attorney in the Atlanta area where she had one. I think hers was actually an internal I-9 audit and not a ICE audit. And we did it together. She learned, and type things like that. So you're probably better off if trying to get some type of internal I-9 audit for a client, and then bring in someone who's experienced and can give you guidance so
Yeah.
that you can learn what you need to learn. Um, I've got a book that I co-authored, the I-9 and E-Verify Handbook. Second edition was issued 2017. The first edition was authored by Greg Siskin, so we're listed as co-authors in the second edition. Third edition should be out later this year if I can ever finish it. Um, so that's a great resource.
Hmm.
But I mean, I would never try to, if you're just totally cold on, I-9 compliance stuff, and you get a call, you probably need to refer that call out. And maybe you can get that the attorney you call it out to allow you to, co-counsel
Yeah.
with them so you can pick it up. But I don't think it's possible to or it's not advisable. I guess it's possible,
Yeah.
not advisable to try to go it alone. And I don't know what I mean, the thousands about as much as I've done on my own. There's some software that is in the works of being able to take the I-9s and put them into software and spit out a report. It's still not there yet. One of the problems is so many employers still do it by paper and writing, and you have different writing styles and whatnot that it's harder to read. So it's taken some time.
Yeah.
Hopefully that will come about in the future. In the near future, as opposed to the dis-
I've encountered companies that have they have like paralegals that just focus on I-9 who help them on a regular basis. So when they get these raids, at least you're working with them. So there's some partnership to help either the HR or them to deal with the numbers. As you said, if you get 1,000 cases, it's hard to just do it all one. You need to go through this paperwork. Just the fact that someone pick it up and clean it up because it might be a mess, put it in some sort of order so you can read it. But
I agree.
yeah,
There's a large. I dealt with one of the large companies in Memphis, and I think they had two paralegals dedicated to I-9 stuff,
mm.
and they were of great assistance.
Now, one thing I wanted to ask is like you talked about just getting warning notices sometimes. What's the differentiation for someone not getting fined, and what could he do to make that difference?
Well, I mean, you could have a client that actually filled out their I-9s correctly, but that's going to be pretty few and far between. Though I will tell you, you might hear from a bunch of folks that swear they have good I-9s, but when you look at them, they're not. Um, you got to get in there and remediate where you can.
Hmm.
uh, Hopefully you can remediate a lot of the mistakes. Maybe some of these mistakes were made years and years ago, more than 5 years ago,
Yeah.
and later down the line you can apply the statute of limitations on timeliness
Oh, they have
violations.
that. Okay.
Now it's not applicable to all violations on an I-9, just a timeliness one. So that's always a good one. You can definitely, ICE won't give it to you in the beginning. You have to say, hey, that's beyond the statute. And they go, oh yeah, okay. Uh, so, um, so that's the big difference. Nice that you don't destroy any I-9s. That you have I-9s for everybody. I mean, except for that Chinese restaurant, if you don't have an I-9 for somebody when you get the notice of inspection, even if you go get it, you're normally going to get penalized.
Mhm.
And it's really bad if it's if they ask for terminated employees. They have a right to ask for terminated employees
Mm.
back 3 years. They usually don't go past 1 or 2. But if you find out you don't have an I-9 on some terminated employees, well, what are you going to do? I mean, they're terminated, they're long gone. You're not going to be able to track them down.
Yeah.
So, you're just going to have to, you know, take the hit. I've got a
Yeah.
construction company down in Florida, and they didn't have any. They had like 3 I-9s, and they'd gone through. Construction companies go through a lot of employees, and they argued, hey, I think it's they were all independent contractors. I'm like, no, they weren't. They were employees, and
Yeah.
we just have to. I mean, we're waiting for the fine. I'm sure we're going to get one. So that's that's the difference. Or they don't, because you don't hire counsel, or you don't hire proper counsel, you don't remediate the errors, and then so the I-9s go to ICE, and the ICE auditor says nope, 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 and says these are the violations. They issue a notice of intent to fine. You immediately give them notice that you're going to appeal it to Oklahoma, because that opens, you only have 30 days to do that. That opens the negotiations. That
Mhm.
doesn't mean you really want to take it to Oklahoma. That means you just want to negotiate. And then you make your best offer. Like I say, almost every office I've dealt with, except Chicago, has been incredibly receptive to negotiations. Chicago thinks they're not allowed. I'm like, well, I can tell you, it's a federal law, and everywhere in the nation except Chicago, everybody negotiates.
Yeah.
So we'll see. When push comes to shove, they might take my second offer. And you know what? If don't, and your client is willing and you think you can save money if you take it to Oklahoma, then call their bluff and say, nah, we're not going to settle this. We'll take it to Oklahoma. And the good thing about taking it to Oklahoma, twofold. One, they just recently got a settlement judge program started. So you get a settlement judge involved before you get fully into litigation. Well, anytime anybody who's been around judges knows they want to settle. They
Yeah.
don't want to litigate, and so they're gonna push both sides. And as a practitioner, it's sometimes hard to push the government. If the government wants to say hell no, they just say hell no. But they got to now say hell no to a federal judge, to a
Mhm.
Oklahoma judge.
Yeah.
Um, and then it's still, if it doesn't work, you litigate. And I write an article every year. Well, last couple of years there haven't been enough decisions to warrant it from Oklahoma, but studying every Oklahoma decision on I-9 penalties.
Yeah.
And it's varied over the years, but I think I've been doing it since 2012, writing the article. But anywhere from 25 to 35% reduction if you litigate. And some of these times you actually lose all your position, all your arguments. The last one that was just issued like 2 months ago, the client tried, not wasn't my client, but the employer tried all these various arguments, and then Oklahoma said, no, 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 no. But then they said, but we don't really like the way that ICE formula is set up. It's not right. It's too heavy on this. And so, yeah, we're going to reduce you from 210,000 to 136,000, or
Hmm.
something like that. It was about a 35% reduction, even though they really didn't win any of the underlying points. It was just Oklahoma didn't like what ICE was offering as their formula, and so they knocked it down. So that's one of the things I try to use it to my advantage in litigate in settlement. I said, hey, if I litigate this, on average, I'm going to be able to knock your number down by 35%. And I use that as an argument that you're being unduly punitive.
Yeah.
And how did we determine you're unduly punitive? Well, this is how much Oklahoma knocks it down on average. And it's been a extremely successful argument with various ICE offices. They're like, okay, yeah, I see your point. Or I think some of the ICE attorneys, they really, most of them only dabble in this. They're really, they're really in immigration court. They want to deport people.
Yeah.
And once they figure out that they're up against somebody who knows what the hell they're talking about, they're like, I don't want to do this. I mean, I had one attorney literally admit to me, you know way, way more about this than I do. I don't really that much. I'm like, I don't know why she would have said that. I think that's not a good way to start settlement talks. But hey, you know what? If you want to give me that advantage from day one, I'll take it. You know.
Now, in the process of going through the I-9s, you end up talking to some of these employees, and potentially you see they have the option for TPS, or they may be able to adjust status even based on immediate relative case or something like that. So there's a lot of additional opportunities for clients. Do you pick up clients that way? Like we talk to people, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, we could do adjustment.
Well, that's really a conflict of interest because I do represent the employer, and especially like if we were going to like keep that employee on as we try to get them, legal status, then that's admitting we know
Yeah.
they're undocumented, and then that subjects the employer to a pretty substantial fine up to about $4,500 per undocumented. Because at that point, you're knowingly employing
Yeah.
someone undocumented. If you just take somebody's fake green card, which happens, quite frankly, every day,
Yeah.
but if you don't know it's a fake green card, and you don't have to know because you don't have to be a document expert, you don't
Yeah.
have to put it under a black light, um, and ICE tells you later, hey, this document wasn't any good. Oh, okay, I didn't know that. They're not going to fine you for it. They're going to make you fire that employee if they can't produce another document.
But what if they
Um,
fire the employee? Say, oh, we find out, but then say, well, if he gets TPS in 6 months, he could come back. So could you please get this process started for the person? Would that something possible?
I wouldn't feel comfortable with that. But I would tell them, here's a lawyer in town, maybe that does
Yeah.
humanitarian or does family. There's certainly, especially when DACA came along, there's a lot of opportunities there,
Yeah.
and referred those folks out. And and there was a time in Atlanta we were trying to work that out. I didn't represent the employer. The employer knew we had they had some problems, and they were trying to, to help, um, I guess, employees that they had recently fired. They wanted them back.
Hmm.
Uh, for whatever reason, didn't work out. But I just, I wouldn't feel comfortable with it. I don't want to. I don't want to play both sides of the fence there. I mean,
Sure.
I've had this company that I mentioned in the beginning, the first I-9 audit. You know, I had somebody come into the office for a consultation, and didn't have the name of the employer. Had the name of the person, and they started saying, "Hey, I don't have papers, and I work for XYZ." And I just stopped the interview right there and said, "Well, I got to stop the interview. You're going to have to leave." And I actually had to go get a ethics opinion on what do I
Wow.
do. 'Cause now I represent the employer, and I've had a consultation. And they told me, even though I had the consultation, I really didn't represent that employee. I had to keep that confidential and not tell my client.
Yeah.
And because if I did, then I really would be violating the confidentiality of the
Sure.
consultation. So I don't really want to face a lot of those situations.
Hmm.
I can see what you say of, well, they're already gone, so why don't you help them after the fact? Um, I you know,
Yeah, I
I,
hear what you're
I
saying.
guess I guess that's a consideration.
Hmm.
Uh, I, I, I don't think it's enough to persuade me to take a
Sure.
case like.
Well, I mean, it's interesting that I-9 compliance is such a niche area, but it's bountiful, and there's so much not only in dealing with an audit that comes forward, but as I said, training, which is just needed. There's thousands of companies, so it's just you could really develop a brand name just on something like this and really take it home. Now, it's a personal opinion question. Is it possible to consistently complete these I-9s, even if you have a PhD? Is there always going to be problems? Is it a badly designed system? Is it too complicated? Are there any solutions to this?
Uh, it probably is a badly designed system. I mean, there's so many little points on a two-page I-9, to basically get you. It
Yeah.
used to be a one page, and it was even worse than was a one page. It was actually better when it became two pages because they didn't try to jam everything onto one page. So now they've jammed everything on the two pages, but it's a little spread out. I mean, you really have to be conscious of it. I think people are getting better at it, mainly because they see the consequences. I mean,
Yeah.
when I started doing it in 2007, I kind of jokingly thought that 50% of HR managers must be blind, because any blind idiot could see all the mistakes. They didn't even check off whether they were a U.S. citizen or a green card holder. And the reason they weren't blind, there was no consequences. Nobody had been audited since the act came into being in 1986. So who cared? They just
Yeah.
filled it out, put it in a drawer, or, put it in their file, and that was it. And so, then there became consequences of it. And so I think things have gotten better. Unfortunately, there's still, companies out there, usually small companies, getting off the ground, or maybe they've been on the ground for a few years. They don't know what an I-9 is. I
Mhm.
think they really don't. And several of them have said to me, well, I mean, the federal government needs to set up a program to explain to new employers every single thing they need to do. And I'm like, oh, okay. And are you also one of those folks that thinks the government ought to get off your back? Hell yeah. I'm like, well, you just put the government on your back by doing that. And so there's not a good answer
Yeah.
to that. You
It
know,
is complex because there's so many different visa categories and employment authorization cards, and like there's green card. It's just so all over the place that I mean, it's really hard to fully grasp it with all the options and idea types.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I just went across one the other day, and I think you probably see it more on the West Coast in this case. In this case, the clients in Hawaii. These folks came from the Marshall Islands.
Ooh,
Well, the
okay.
Marshall Islands is kind of considered just a totally different animal, and they have different codes on their I-94, and some of them get work permits. Some of them use their I-94, as proof they're authorized to work. Um, and I had this client with a whole bunch of folks in the Marshall Islands, and some of their documents were adding up, and some of them weren't, but they were like, they're all from the Marshall Islands. So it doesn't matter. We're good. I'm like,
Yeah.
no. we're currently under an I-9 audit out in Hawaii. We don't want to screw this up. These folks have got to go out and they got to be able to get their I-94. And as you know, sometimes when you go on the computer onto the website for I-94, it doesn't pop up.
Yeah.
And so you have to work those kinks out. I sent them to the I-94 to the ICE office there in Hawaii, or CBP, I guess.
Yeah. See,
And to try to get that worked out. So there are, and like I say here, in my practice, I don't think I'd ever run across somebody from the Marshall Islands. I knew about him because there was a story about Tyson Foods in Northwest Arkansas, and they'd hired, like, I don't know, 5,000, 10,000. They hired enough people from the Marshall Islands. They have their own grocery store in Northwest Arkansas. So I remembered reading, not seeing that
yeah.
story, but I didn't really grasp all the ins and outs. So, and if you are in a high tech area, then you are going to see probably more visas. Now,
Yeah.
a lot of times on these ICE audits, you're in I mean, they go for manufacturing, construction, staffing, hospitality, and in those areas, your chances of getting, your O visa, your H-1B, your TN, various E2 visas are diminished.
Yeah.
Then you might get make sure everything's right on OPT, and have they stayed beyond their 1 year period of OPT? Are they eligible for OPT STEM and things like that? But if I do a lot of healthcare companies, and those are the ones who are using the more high tech, the TNs, the H-1Bs,
Yeah.
the O1s, to bring people in. And so that's going to be difficult for their HR when they get when they're looking at their I-9s.
Mhm.
But now most healthcare companies don't get audited. Though I've had a hospital chain twice get audited. I'm not really sure. I always thought about why would you pick a hospital? I mean, that, to me, that's a fairly safe setting, that you're not going to get that many undocumented folks working in a hospital. At least
Yeah.
this was Arkansas and Mississippi. I just didn't see it. But anyway, and we did great. We no fines, warning notices in both places. But and maybe maybe they got the word, hey, don't bother to go there anymore.
Well, it really comes full circle with the anecdote about Marshall Islands. It's not all forms, it
Right,
depends on what country, what visa classification. There's all these nuances.
right,
I think
right,
experience is the only thing. Over time, reading a lot and experience and
right.
constantly being involved in the immigration game and conferences, it's just constant education.
Right. I try to go to the ALA worksite enforcement conferences. Guess we didn't have one last year, but had one in Utah the year before, Boston the year before. I luckily get the opportunity to serve on the ALA's verification and documentation liaison committee. We liaison with USCIS, E-Verify, ICE, IER, and you get a lot of great insight
Yeah.
with those issues. And quite frankly, there's 15 of us on the committee, and there's 15 smart as hell folks serving on that committee, and you get access to everybody's brain,
That's
and
great.
we are always feeding off each other. So that's helpful. The last thing I'll plug, shameless plug, is I have a blog. Best way to get to it is on Twitter, at Buchanan Visa Law, Buchanan, and Visa Law, VISALAW. It's also available on LinkedIn. It's available on the web through, I don't know how many people subscribe to ILW.com.
Yeah.
They put out a daily publication, and that's where the article will show up originally. Great. I think the ILW is great resource. I read a lot of good stuff there. But I try to put out good stuff maybe twice a week. Sometimes it's a struggle. This weekend I was looking around, I could only find one article. Then big settlement on Procter and Gamble on a alienage discrimination case involving DACA folks just happened.
Yeah.
And that's going to be my next article, probably
Yeah.
come out tomorrow.
There was a big bank, I think, about the discriminating. He got hit for discriminating against DACA. It's a big bank or something like that. But
Okay. This
um,
was kind of surprising that they this is Procter and Gamble and they settled for 3
wow,
million.
wow, that's big. So
Yeah.
before we go, I'm glad you mentioned your blog and the Twitter. I'm definitely going to post that and really promote it because it's a lot of good information. This is like business practice, but a lot of people think, if you're in Los Angeles, New York, Miami, these are the hubs for immigration. Nashville is obviously exploding right now with population, with everyone's going out there leaving the big cities because of all the issues. But you've proven that you could have a practice in a mid-sized city. Siska and Susser's right there too. They have huge operations. You work with them, have your book. So if people are not in the LA, Seattle, New York kind of atmosphere as an immigration attorney, there's corporate immigration, there's humanitarian, there's all this kind of stuff everywhere in the United States.
Absolutely. And just looking at the folks who are on our verification committee, you got one in Omaha, not exactly thought of as the hub
Yeah,
of everything. We do have Chicago, DC, Dallas, but we have Charlotte. I don't even remember where all the cities people are from, but so it's spread out, and because there's employers everywhere.
yeah.
Atlanta is a great, we're close to Atlanta, so and I do a lot of work with Ayla down in the Georgia Alabama chapter, so I have a
Hmm.
lot of contacts there, and especially for medium to small employers who don't already have their go-to immigration attorney. Then if they get hit with an ICE audit, they're giving
Yeah.
me a call, and that's how I get a decent amount of cases is referrals on from other immigration attorneys. Go, I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole, or even some employment attorneys who know me, and say, well, we need to bring in an expert, and here, I'll call him, and we'll get him down here immediately.
Wonderful. Well, it's good to know you, to know where to go with these kind of cases, and you share so much valuable information. Even the work on liaison committee, where you could really ask good questions, or work with ALA chapters for referrals. It's just getting involved with the immigration system, being active is so important, especially people who are newer in this, but people who have been doing it for a long time, kind of keeping themselves run their practice. There's more opportunity working with other immigration attorneys than there are distance yourself. So it's not a competitive
Oh,
environment.
I agree 100%. I mean, I love serving on committees. I've been on the planning committee for the several of the chapters here in Tennessee. We actually have an active bar association immigration section. Just
Wow.
finished hitting that up for the last year. We put out our own newsletter. I'm the edit. I think I've been the editor now for, I don't know, 12 years in a row or something. Nobody else wants it, I think is what. Oh no, I finally gave that up. I got somebody to take it over last month. So after 12 years. So but he says he may not keep it, so I may get it back at some later date. But those are I know a lot of the state bars don't really get that involved in immigration, but I mean, you're going to learn way more than, yeah, you're going to take up some time, but it's going to be
Yeah,
worth your time,
for
even if
sure.
it means, maybe doing, writing an article on a Sunday afternoon for your immigration publication, or, becoming an editor at something. We have an 11th Circuit newsletter out of the Atlanta or Alabama, Georgia chapter, and it covers all kinds of 11th Circuit, District Court, PIA, Okaho, and I'm the editor, and as I'm editing it, sometimes I'm trying to pull my hair out, but I learn a lot. I mean, I get an opportunity to read, I don't know, summaries of 40, 50, 60 cases every 3 months, and those are things put in the back of your head.
Yeah.
I think I read about that. Let me, and or what, I need to get with that attorney. Maybe they can help me a little more there.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. Networking is great.
And one thing I started doing, when I see a court case is interesting or an article is interesting, I do reach out to the author. Sometimes it'll be a federal court case success. I'll reach out just to congratulate them. But they're there, and most of the times they reach out, they'll talk with you, or clarification or strategy and all that kind of stuff. That's what we're
Yeah.
all here for.
And if you can get the ear of a reporter or two, that's great. I mean, I won't say that I'm the go-to person for you know for the reporters, but I regularly Bloomberg. I've
Mhm.
got a good source up there, um, and some of the other smaller publications. Sherm puts out a newsletter.
Yeah.
And they'll, hey, I've been contacted by Newsweek and, New York Times. Unfortunately, those two didn't run the story or didn't use my material. I was a little upset about that, but that's just, but
Yeah.
you educated the reporter. So,
Yeah,
uh,
exactly.
so and sometimes I'll tell the reporter, wait, you know what, you can go to so and so and get a little more information. That Procter and Gamble case, when it
Hmm.
started, I got a phone call, and I talked to him for a while. I said, but you know what, I can put you in touch with somebody who will, be able to build on what I'm telling you, and
Yeah.
and so that's a great way to network and hopefully get your name out, and
Yeah.
reporters will. I mean, as one reporter said, local, hey, we need somebody to get on front, get on the camera and talk. You're an immigration lawyer. I'm like, man, I didn't wear this is like pre-COVID. I'm like, I don't have a tie, I don't have a coat. The lady's going, I don't care. If you'll just get on camera, I'll be over there in 30 minutes. And I got a bunch of questions. And I'm like, yeah, okay, fine, and sometimes it's just they're looking for that immigration angle in a story. I think it was over
Yeah.
I don't know, the Boston bomb, the bomber up in Boston. I think
Yeah.
that person had been let in on a diversity lottery. And so, oh, what do we know about the diversity lottery? Do they just let every criminal in? Blah blah blah. And so that's what they wanted to know about was diversity lottery. So it's like,
Yeah.
okay, sure, I can talk about that.
Well, Bruce, thank you so much for coming on the show. Definitely have you again. I look forward to working with you on the
And
magazine
we'll work
too.
on that article.
Yeah, definitely, definitely, and have you on an editorial board with the magazine would be great.
Okay,
So I'll be in touch with you on that. But thanks for so much for coming on.
thank you. Appreciate it.
Have a good one.
You too.